All right, I think we're ready to get started here. Welcome, everybody out there in the wine world. My name is Jeff McGinnis, and I am the National Beverage Director for the WINESTYLES family of stores. Very excited today to be bringing yet another installment in our virtual winery spotlight program. As most of you are aware, we've been doing these for a number of years, physically in each of the locations, but given COVID, we've gone virtual with these and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future with some hybrid approaches. I see some of the folks actually in the stores in Des Moines, in Johnston, in Chicago. So it's great to see this hybrid approach working out with people joining us live via Zoom or physically in each of the locations. A few reminders before we get started, more importantly, before we start drinking some wine, which is why we're all here. First and foremost, everybody is muted. That's not to mean we don't want this to be interactive. All I say is that if you have questions, comments, anything you want to share for the betterment of the group, we ask you just post in that chat function. I will definitely be monitoring that. So post your questions, post your observations, post things that you find interesting about the wines, a unique flavor things in there. Second, although the wines are obviously for sale in each of our locations that are participating in this, most of the stores will continue to have their Google Forms set up through Monday. That way you can go online during or after the event, place those orders for those stores. Somebody from the store will reach out to you, let them know that those are available for pickup, or you can just come in as well. The sale pricing will remain live until Monday, I believe. After that, there are no promises. Third, all of our stores are obviously open. We've remained open during COVID, mostly for retail business, largely because of the support that you guys have given us. We've been able to weather the storm, so to speak. But we are at a point where pretty much every single one of our locations is open for on-premise service. So you can come in, sit down, have a glass of wine, have a charcuterie plate, have a cheese plate, in a socially distant fashion. Each store has their own requirements because their location, whether it's in Wisconsin or Chicago or Nebraska or one of the Iowa stores, we all have different setups, but we're definitely being safe with our social distancing and our cleaning standards. So with no further ado, I want to introduce our special guest, and more importantly, he can start tasting us on his wonderful wines. We are lucky to have Daniel Daou with DAOU Vineyards. He is one of the two brothers that are the owners. He is also the winemaker. He will talk us through the wines, but more importantly, tell us his family's story, why Paso Robles, what is so wonderful about Paso when it comes to the climate and geography and geology, and then obviously tell us his passion for wine and philosophy behind his winemaking. So welcome, Daniel. Great to have you. I'm very super excited to be tasting and trying these wines with you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody, for having me. Hopefully, we're going to have a great time for the next hour and not only talk about our journey as a family, but also talk about these wines. And more importantly, as you said, Jeff, what makes Paso Robles arguably the greatest, or one of the greatest for sure, terroir in the world for growing wines. Our journey starts in the country of Lebanon, where we were born. My brother and I were born in Lebanon and immigrated to France, where our mom was from. And we grew up most of our youth in France, in the south of France, as well as in Paris. And it was really in France that we developed this beautiful passion for wine. Our dad loved wine, so he would drink a bottle of wine every day, half of it at lunch, half of it at dinner. And I have such fond memories of spending time with my dad. He would give me a little wine to drink. Of course, he would always add a little water, which I hated. And he would go on, he would get very philosophical, very jovial, very happy. And I'm like, wow, you can actually drink a glass of wine and become like that. It was like, it's a great reaction. So in my early 20s, so moved to the United States when I was 18 years old. Both my brother and I did. We both attended the University of California, San Diego, and majored in computer and electrical engineering. The idea was to come to the land of opportunity here, to live the American dream. And we fell in love with this country. So after college, we decided to stay. And our first company we founded together, we were two young men. I was 21, he was 25, and it had nothing to do with wine. It was actually computerizing hospitals all across the country. And the company was actually called DAOU Systems. But very quickly in my 20s, to the surprise of my family, I came to the realization that my true calling was to become a winemaker. And clearly the reaction of my family wasn't positive. They're like, what do you mean you want to become a winemaker? We don't have winemakers in the family. You're an engineer, you're an executive. what do you want to become a farmer? But I quickly realized that, my calling was to be a winemaker. So in my 20s, I started obviously collecting wine, drinking wine in my early 20s. But then I started, reading about winemaking, and started trying to figure out, if I were to start a winery and if I were to become a winemaker, where would it be? What would it look like? And that question took 8 years to answer, where I searched the globe for what I consider today arguably the greatest terroir on earth for growing, especially Bordeaux varieties, but also other varieties that we're going to talk about today. Now, I have to tell you, it was a very interesting journey, because about 15 years ago or so, I packed my bags while living in San Diego. We purchased our mountain, which we fondly called DAOU Mountain, which is at the time was only 100 acres. Today it's grown because we bought it, the adjacent properties, and moved up there with my 5 children, planted the first 26 acres myself, lived in a 1,000 square foot modular, and I fell in love. The best way to say it is I fell in love. And I quickly realized that even with no power and no water the first month or two, life was the most beautiful when it was in the most simple ways. So working all day in the vineyard, having a bottle of wine at night under the stars, and managing to make myself some food, but just admiring Mother Nature and just absorbing the beautiful terroir that we have on our mountain was something so magical that I fell in love. And that is the best way I can describe it, and I never looked back. So over the last 16 years, it's been an incredible journey. We met incredible people. We've hired some incredible people that join our family, like Kimberly, who's on the call today, or Josh Lavitz as well, who's on the call, that is part of our family, part of our people at DAOU. But we've had a huge impact on wine, the wine industry, not just in America, but internationally as well. This year we will be in 50 countries, and today we're the fastest growing winery in the United States. So what is causing that? And this is what I want to spend a little time describing this to you, not for the sake of boasting, but for the sake of explaining to you why the wines are turning out so unique, that they're receiving the highest ratings across the board from every critic, and that consumers are flocking to these wines and having a hard time drinking something else after they drink them. What is the reason for that is the question. And it's a scientific answer. I wish I could give you an emotional answer, because clearly the emotion is here and clearly the passion is here, but I'm going to give you the scientific answer, because numbers really don't lie. So let's look at the word terroir. Start with that. The word terroir is a French word that comes from the French word terre, which means earth. But terroir describes a place, a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of location. So it really describes, at the end of the day, predominantly 2 things: soil and climate. So you're dealing with 2 components that are arguably going to dictate the quality of your wine. So you could be the greatest winemaker in the world, but if you don't have a great terroir, chances are you will not make great wines. So what is it that's so unique where we are on DAOU Mountain? You see the picture right behind me, that's our winery. What is it that's so unique there that we like to refer to it as a rare phenomenon, because it doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet? Well, let's start with the soils. What do we know about soil? The wine industry goes back thousands of years, and we have a lot of data. What we do know about soils is that arguably almost every vineyard in Europe, let's say the vast majority of vineyards in Europe, all share one soil in common. This is a soil that we call in French argilo-calcaire, or calcareous clay in English. You'll find it in Bordeaux, you'll find it in Burgundy, you'll find it in the Rhone region, you'll find it in Alsace, in Champagne, you'll find it in the Loire Valley, in Tuscany, in Spain, in Austria, in Germany, Portugal. Wherever you look, these soils are present everywhere. And Europeans love to plant vines on these soils. Now, what's the reason why? Well, I'm going to give you several different reasons. These soils have 2 components. They have a first component, which is clay, but underneath there's what's called a very porous limestone subsoil. See, the clay is going to give you bouquet, nose, which is very important when you get that floral character in a wine. It's very mesmerizing. That comes from the clay. Clay is going to give you color, especially in a red wine. You're going to get that dark color, and darker color is directly associated with more texture, therefore higher quality. A great wine from a great vintage tend to have more color than a wine from a bad vintage. It's also going to give you fat and flesh in the wine. And that is very important too. When you drink a glass of wine, when you drink some wine, fat, flesh plays a huge role in the quality of a wine. You don't want it to taste like fruit juice and acid. So you need that flesh, you need that fat in the wine, which really puts on volume. So when you drink that wine, it just really, fills up your palate. So that's the clay. But you see, clay alone doesn't cut it. You need that underneath the limestone subsoil. And it's going to provide you with three things. First thing it's going to do, it's going to provide you with the ability to make natural wines. Most wines in California are acidulated. Winemakers have to add tartaric acid to balance out the wines because the soils are not French in California. So when you do that, it offsets the innate balance of the wine that comes from the vineyard. And it often bites you right here or scratches you right here. That is a very common thing. But California is not the only place where you have to adjust wines. Bordeaux often has to add sugar because they don't get enough alcohol. So you see, often terroirs have to compensate for what Mother Nature has not provided with a place, with a terroir that you have. These soils allow you to make wines that are natural. Most of our wines, especially the ones from our states, are made naturally with only our native yeast and nutrition for the yeast to finish the fermentation, which is a very unique proposition that you don't easily find. The second thing these wines are going to give you is something that goes beyond fruit and alcohol. See, wine has to have earthiness. You need to taste the soil. You need to taste the earth. You need to have the layers of minerality and complexity where it goes beyond just fruit and alcohol. European wines are known for that. If you drink a European wine, it's often a terroir-driven wine where you're tasting the earth, you're tasting the soil. California wines, generally speaking, tend to be more climate-driven. When you taste a California wine, you're tasting climate, you're tasting fruit, you're tasting alcohol. So you see, these soils allow you to have that minerality and those layers and that earthiness that comes from the soil. The last thing these soils do is they allow you to dry farm. Now, there's a reason why Europeans love to plant these vines on these soils, because they're not allowed to water. But that's not so in California. Everybody's allowed to irrigate. So therefore, when you have these soils, even in California, you can dry farm the grapes without adding any irrigation. It's relying purely on the rain, the precipitation that comes in the winter season. There's only one bad news with these soils. Maybe you've guessed it by now. You don't find them in California. Most of California does not have French soils. The only large presence of these soils is on the west side of Paso Robles and a little bit on the east side, but mostly on the west side. And if you look at terrain right behind me, that is a typical west side, landscape. You see hills. You're at higher elevation, usually between 1,700 and 2,200 feet elevation. The soils are reminiscent exactly of Bordeaux. So when I found these soils, it was almost shocking because I'd never expected to find French soils in California. So now let's talk about the second formula, the climate part. The climate is very important because you don't want to be too hot, because if you're too hot, you cook the grapes. You degrade the quality of the wine. If you're too cold, you don't ripen. And then you've got very hard tannins and you've got pyrazine and bell pepper. So you don't want to be too cold, but you don't want to be too hot either. So how do we measure that? Well, there are two ways we measure that. One is how many days reach about 100 degrees or more during the year. Why is that important? Because when the vine reaches 100 degrees, it no longer produces sugar. It basically shuts down. It goes into survival mode. The canopy gets fried. The fruit gets sunburned. And at the end of the day, too many days over 100 degrees equals lower quality. But also we measure the average temperature. So the average temperature is very important because that's directly correlated to when you ripen and how you ripen. So let's take a look at our mountain compared to other regions in the world. For instance, let's look at 2019. Number of days, the Paso airport, which is on the east side of Paso, got the entire 2019 year was 28 days at 100 degrees. So I can see why some people come to Paso and say, well, it's hot. Some parts of Paso are hot. Okay. Now, Napa, for instance, in St. Helena, saw 11 days at 100 degrees in 2019. Even Pauillac, the birthplace of Cabernet Sauvignon and Bordeaux, saw 4 days at 100 degrees. On our mountain, we saw 0. Not a single day reached 100 degrees in 2019. In 2020, arguably one of the warmest years on records, We saw 6 days at 100 degrees, which was very warm for us. Still not too warm, but more warmer than normal. Napa saw 18 and Paso saw 32. So you can see how we track typically about 4 to 5 degrees cooler than St. Helena and Napa, but about 5 degrees warmer than Bordeaux. So it gives us just the perfect climate because of our high elevation. It allows us to achieve ripeness year after year without overcooking the grapes. This is actually, our mountain is the only site in California that's at 2,200 feet elevation, yet only about 14 miles from the very cold Pacific Ocean. We've searched the world for 8 years. Our mountain, or the area, the Adelaida district where we're located, is the only place we found on Earth that combines the French soils, the European soils, and that wonderful climate that allows us to ripen year after year, and allows us to really, receive grapes in perfect condition consistently every year. What that has done is it allowed us to over-deliver on every price point, which is why if you look at our wines, many of them, like the ones we're going to taste today, a couple of them, like the Reserve Cabernet, it's a wine you can put against any Cabernet that sells for $1,000 or more. We've done it. We do it hundreds of times per year. It's a wine that's capable of aging 3 or 4 decades or more, and it's very affordable. So it's we call that approachable luxury. The ability to deliver so much more wine for a lower price. It's caused us to be the fastest growing winery in America today. So we're obviously very, very excited about what we do. We're a family-owned winery. My brother and I own the winery. We're multi-generational. I have 5 children, 4 of which are in the industry. 2 are winemakers. 1 is studying. 1's getting her 3 masters in Europe and joining me back to crush again and make wine with me. 1 handles digital marketing and social media, and 1 handles the vineyards. So it's a family affair for us. We're not a corporation-driven winery. We're really a family-driven winery. And our only desire is to make sure that our best message is always represented in the bottle. So that's in a nutshell the story. We're going to talk about the wines today. There are some great wines that we're going to be going through today. Any questions first? We'd love to answer any questions before we get going on the wines.
I don't see that. Obviously, people jump in if you have questions, but I definitely want to start us off tasting some wines. And so if you can I think the first wine we're going to have is the Sauvignon Blanc. Certainly, I would say many people know your wines from the red wines, the Cab and the Bordeaux blends, but talk to us a little about the Sauv Blanc, how much of you make, the focus of it, and then kind of what our customers should expect to taste in it.
Great, Jeff. So the Sauvignon, so as you know, Sauvignon Blanc is a Bordeaux grape. So there are 2 white Bordeaux grapes, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. And you will often find these grapes in Bordeaux. Clearly, with the terroir that we have, we have the ability to not only grow incredible Sauvignon Blanc, but also, make it in a way where if you look at Sauvignon Blanc, you've got the 2 sides of the spectrum. On one side, you can get a very grassy Sauvignon Blanc that almost burns your nostril because it's very grassy. On the other side of the spectrum, you get a Sauvignon Blanc that lacks minerality, lacks bouquet, lacks a beautiful natural acidity. And you don't want to be on either spectrum because to us, that's the wrong idea of a Sauvignon Blanc. So what we do is we focus on great terroirs to grow this fruit. And what the result of it is a Sauvignon Blanc that's not grassy, but that's not flat either, that incorporates beautiful bouquet that jumps out of the glass. And that really has that beautiful earthiness and layers of minerality that really jumps at you out of the glass. Very hard to find a Sauvignon Blanc at that price point that receives 92 points every year. And we're proud of that because, again, we don't need to spend hundreds of dollars to drink a great bottle of wine. I mean, we make them. If you want to buy them, by all means, we can sell them to you. But we make wines at every price point. And regardless of the price point, we want to over-deliver. And I tell you, I love drinking the Sauvignon Blanc. It's fresh. It doesn't bite and scratch. I love the aroma. The minute you put it in the glass and you smell it, it just jumps out at you with beautiful citrus flavors, which are dominant. You don't get grassiness, but you do get minerality, and you get natural acidity. So I don't know what vintage we're trying. I think the 19 maybe, Kimberly?
Unmute. 19.
19. So yes. 19, I believe, was the first vintage, right? Yeah, so that's the first vintage. I believe the ones who received 92 points by the wine enthusiast. At that price point, you'll be hard to find a wine that gets traded this much for that price point. So again, we're proud of it. I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to chill it very well. It drinks very well chilled, especially in the summer. I like to put it in the fridge, so it's about 39, 40 degrees. And this way it gives you time to just open it and enjoy the bottle as it's slowly warming up, unless you put it in an ice bucket. Would love to hear some comments, but that is a great palate cleanser. So I love to drink Sauvignon Blanc. If I'm at dinner, I always start with Sauvignon Blanc, and I like to go to the reds after that. So it kind of cleanses your palate and prepares you for the beefier, bigger reds that we're going to be pouring next.
I think the cool thing about it has a great balance of fruit and acidity. You know, obviously to your point, it cleanses the palate, but it definitely sort of zips on the palate. You said this is the first vintage. I mean, it looks like you guys don't make a lot of it, or there's only like what, acre and a half planted, or how is it compared to your entire portfolio?
Okay, that's a great question. So we do make a Sauvignon Blanc that is 100% from our estate, but that's not it. This Sauvignon Blanc, what we've done is we've worked with growers to find terroirs that are similar to ours, and basically commission them on planting it the way we want, with the right clones, with the right rootstock. So we have a hand into basically how it's grown, which is why we're able to produce this wine at a lesser price. We do have a more expensive estate Sauvignon Blanc, but it's Asian oak, so it's a different profile. This is no oak. We're really after a very fresh, very vibrant Sauvignon Blanc that pairs great with things like salads or some sushi, something that's very much easy to drink, or octopus. I love grilled octopus with this wine. So this is a different take. So as you will see in our Chardonnay, we do take usually different takes. So sometimes we will make a Chardonnay that uses very little oak or no oak, but then we'll have one that uses 50% new oak. Then we have one that uses 100% new French oak. In the case of the Sauvignon Blanc, this is unoaked because we're after this profile that's very easy drinking, that really cleanses the palate. That is a great introduction wine to your next wine being a red wine, or just during the summer, you're a hot day and it's humid, and it's a great wine to just refresh you.
Absolutely. Linda said this is very nice. I'm a Sauv Blanc lover, and then Paul mentioned I love the earthy undertone. It's a nice balance with the tart fruit. I think obviously they hit the nail on the head. For this price point, it's an amazing buy. So definitely appreciate you guys sharing that with us. The next wine I believe is going to be the DAOU Chardonnay. So again, kind of the same thing. Talk us through that one. Where on the scale of your production does that come? Does it come from your vineyards, as well as sort of your approach to making Chardonnay?
Right. So people often look at me and go, Chardonnay from Paso. We didn't think Paso is too cold for Chardonnay, but the reality is Chardonnay has the perfect terroir in Paso, because we have the same exact soils as Burgundy. And what that does is the following. When you make a Chardonnay out of Paso, you obviously get the beautiful fruit, which is given because we have great climate, and you can taste that in pretty much all the wines. But the best part about these Chardonnays is they can undergo a partial malolactic fermentation, but not get flat or get so heavily acidulated that they're biting you and scratching you, because these soils incorporate great earthiness and minerality. So we're able to maintain a level of minerality and earthiness without heavily acidifying the wines, where you drink a Chardonnay and it scratches your throat and it bites you in the back of the jaw, which is often common, unfortunately, in warmer climates. So we're going to talk about both Chardonnays. So the Chardonnay, the Paso Robles Chardonnay, and the Reserve Chardonnay from Willow Creek. So they're different takes of Chardonnay. First of all, the Chardonnay from Paso Robles comes from different vineyards in Paso. And again, we look for great vineyards to work with in order to make this wine. And again, it's a very affordable Chardonnay. But I think if you're looking for a fresher, less structured level of Chardonnay, that's a great Chardonnay. The Reserve Chardonnay is a different beast. The Reserve Chardonnay comes from a vineyard I've been working with for 10 years. The vines are over 25 years old. They're both located in the Willow Creek district, which is only about 9 miles from the very cold Pacific Ocean. So it's a vineyard designate, actually, wine that will never grow, because it's only 2 small vineyards that basically we have a contract with to manage and do whatever we want to with them for the next 15 years. So we get to manage them, we get to crop them the way we want. And because that site, which is down in a valley, located only 9 miles from the very cold Pacific Ocean, you get the fog in the fall, you get the cooler temperatures, and you get the beautiful soil that is so reminiscent of Burgundy. The result is the Reserve Chardonnay is aged 50% new French oak. It's a very structured Chardonnay. Again, a different taste profile. So they're not competing per se for me, because one is made for lighter food and one is made for if you want to have a smoked, a king salmon or a fillet of salmon with like maybe some fettuccine alfredo. That Reserve Chardonnay can really hold up to that. If you want to have a salad, a light salad, maybe some grilled seafood or something on the lighter side, or nothing, or cheese, I think that Chardonnay, regular Chardonnay, does extremely good job at that. It's enjoyable. The comment I get the most about these Chardonnays, and maybe I'll hear it today, is I don't even like Chardonnay, but I love these Chardonnays. And so if by any chance you've thought of this, let me know, because I love to hear that. And I have yet to do a tasting where I don't hear several people say, I don't even like Chardonnay, but I like these. That's because most Chardonnays are so heavily manipulated that you drink them and they bite you right here and they scratch your throat, and I can drink them. But these will not. These are very nicely integrated. The fruit, the acidity is very much in check, and really allows you to drink this and having it very enjoyable while getting still the minerality and the natural acidity.
Yeah, I think the comment sometimes that we get is, I don't like Chardonnays, but I love Burgundy, white Burgundy. And I guess the distinction is, it's sort of that new world versus old world style of Chardonnay, where you have the overly manipulated, heavily malolactic, heavy oak, where it's this huge big butter bomb. And this, to your point, has that great, amazing balance between the two. Hey, one thing I want to do, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. I think kind of getting the geography is a little bit important. And then you also talked a little bit about the different subregions, and maybe kind of talk, everybody just assumes Paso is one region, and it's not. It's been broken up, and we're starting to see a lot of the sub-AVAs pop up as it relates to that. So I'm going to share this, and kind of, you can talk us through where we're at here.
Correct. So if you think of Paso, it's 614,000 acres. Now you may ask, how big is that? It is larger than Napa and Sonoma put together. It is 5 times the size of Bordeaux, 5 times. So it's huge. So where you are in Paso is going to really determine the quality of your wine. Because as you move more east, you see that sign that says, well, I can't show you here, but where it says San Juan Creek and Paso Robles Estrella District. Now you're going really east. Paso Robles Highland District, really east. That doesn't mean these areas make a bad wine. It's just not the same quality as the ones that are closer to the Pacific Ocean. So if you look at the Paso Robles Willow Creek District and the Adelaida District, those are very close to the Pacific Ocean. Same with the Templeton Gap District. That is called the west side of Paso. And funnily enough, it happens to be the west side of the Highway 101. So when you see the Highway 101, anything that's west of that is going to be cooler, it's going to have more elevation in many cases, and it's going to have soils that are more reminiscent of Europe. Now, you go to El Pomar District, which is a little bit east, not too east, also that has great access to colder air and also soils that are reminiscent of Europe as well. But then the other appellations is really hit and miss. You're going to find more traditional California soils in, for instance, the Estrella District or the San Miguel District or San Juan Creek or Highland District or Creston District. Creston is hit and miss. Part of it is like El Pomar, part of it is not. But the appellations you really want to focus on for high quality wines are the Adelaida District for Bordeaux varieties. The Willow Creek District tends to do better generally with Rhones because you get fog and because you got a lot of rocks, and Cab prefers for clay. So the Adelaida District is really the place for premium Bordeaux varieties. Willow Creek District tends to be known for Rhones, but as you get closer to the Willow Creek District, at the edge of that, you're very close to the Pacific Ocean, close to what's called the York Mountain appellation, which is not part of Paso. Now you're getting into very cold areas that are known for Pinot and Chardonnay. And that's where the Chardonnay Reserve comes from that edge of the Paso Robles Willow Creek, where you really get the colder temperatures where Chardonnay thrives with them.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I mean, that's kind of exactly what I was looking for, because, we're starting to see more and more sub AVAs pop up. Are you going to start to see in Paso, sub appellated wine labeling become a thing, or do you think it's still going to be Paso?
Well, it's happening already. I mean, all of our estate wines have the Adelaida District sub-appellations on them. So all of our wines that we make on the estate, like our Soul of a Lion, that's 100% from our estate. They're all Adelaida district. Some other wines, we like to pull fruit from different places as well as our vineyards. So you can't put Adelaida district, even if it's predominantly Adelaida district. So we can't do that. But, you definitely seen that already. I think you're seeing where the sub-appellations are playing a huge role because people are finally understanding that there is a huge difference between where you are in Paso, given that it's such a big appellation. You really can't just lump something into one appellation. Now, so often I hear critics and journalists, they'll come to Paso, they'll stay downtown where in the summer where you could have 100 degrees, every day for weeks. And they leave Paso and they say, well, we've been to Paso and it's very hot. But that would be the equivalent of me going to Carneros and leaving and writing that Sonoma and Napa are very actually cold and I'm not sure how they grow cab, which would make no sense. So you have to really look at, to your point, Jeff, you really have to look at where you are in Paso.
Yep, absolutely. One question that we had on the Chardonnays was the different oak profiles between the Chardonnay and then the reserve Chardonnay. What specifically, how is the oak profile different on those two?
On the reserve Chardonnay, we're looking at 50% new French oak for a period of 11 months, stirring the leaves to create that voluptuousness and that layered, that layered mouthfeel by stirring the leaves and creating what's called in French batonnage. We totally stay away from being a butter bomb, as somebody's mentioning. Butter bombs come from basically going through 100% malolactic fermentation with 100% new French American oak typically, and stirring the leaves a lot with that, and you end up with popcorn. And there's a style for that if people like that, but I like to stay on the more classic style where I'm looking for creaminess. I'm not looking for butteriness. So to do that, I taste the not only the wine, but I taste the leaves because I'm stirring the leaves regularly, trying to create that creaminess that I'm looking for. And when I reach that point where you get the creaminess, I stop stirring the leaves. So it's a lot of effort to make these wines.
Absolutely. What about the ageability of the Chardonnays?
So the Paso Chardonnay really is not a wine to be aged. I mean, yeah, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years is not a problem. The reserve Chardonnay, the oldest is from 08. Actually, I just had it and it's drinking great. So I wouldn't be afraid to lay down the reserve Chardonnay for several years, a decade or more. I think it will hold up very well.
Absolutely. All righty. Any other questions, comments as it relates to either the Sauv Blanc or the 2 Chardonnays? Speak now or forever hold your peace. We can always come back to them if you have more observations and whatnot. Let's move on. I believe the first red we're going to have is the DAOU Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes, so this has been a great success for our winery because it's a Cabernet Sauvignon that if you look at, for instance, critics, for the last 11 years, every critic has given this wine from 90 to 94 points every year for 11 years. Now, as you know, it's a very affordable wine, but it's a wine that really gives a lot of pleasure. It's plush, it's drinkable, accessible upon release. Nothing bites you or scratch you in it. It's a great representation of how Cabernet Sauvignon can grow in the Paso Robles region. And this is a wine that is aged in 50% new French oak for about 11 months. So we really try to really influence the wine with the oak nuances, but not overdoing it. We don't want the wine, we don't want you to drink oak. We want you to taste the effect of the oak, the coffee, the toffee, the vanilla, all these wonderful flavors that come from the French oak. And this is a wine that, does extremely well. It doesn't break the bank. And it's an easily drinkable wine on a daily basis. If you like Cabernet, I think you'll be impressed with how this wine drinks, especially for the price point. It is a wine that we like to call Discovery Cabernet because we make 6 levels of Cabernet Sauvignon ranging from $20 to $1,000 a bottle. And we call it Discovery because often people discover all the rest of our wines that we're going to be tasting, some of them next, by actually tasting this wine. So I hope you enjoy it. Would love to hear some comments, but it has, even though it's Cabernet Sauvignon, the rule is anytime you have 75% of a variety, you're able to call it this variety, but we always like to blend a little bit in it, a little bit of Merlot, a little bit of Petit Verdot to round up the wine and fill up the middle palate. But it is a Cabernet Sauvignon.
Does the blend change year to year?
Yes.
And are you looking for a consistent flavor profile year to year in this Cabernet?
I'm looking for consistency in flavors, but I want to always be true to the vintage. So we don't try to manufacture this wine You're going to have vintage variations on a year-to-year basis. I believe we're drinking the 18 right now. Is that correct, Emily? Yeah, the 18 was fantastic. It's one of my favorite vintage. It was a cooler vintage, so you're going to get a little bit of a European profile in it. You're going to get a little more earthiness because it was a cooler vintage. The temperature, cooled down quite a bit in August and never warmed back up. So we were able to hang a lot longer. So I love the tannin profile on the 18. They're very supple, very integrated, very plush. You don't need to lay down this wine. And it's a wine that can really compete with wines that sell for 3, 4, 5,000 more. So we bring a lot of value into this wine. And again, we're proud of it because it allows people to discover the rest of our wines as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that I kind of noticed from Paso, and I think I've heard other people mention it, is cabs tend to have a little bit more fruit flavor profile, big, luscious fruit. And this has it, but it definitely has that earthiness and acidity to balance that. Is that because of the specific terroir that you're working with in your location versus other areas of Paso?
Yes, so we focus on terroirs that, we want to stay away from terroirs that, as I mentioned before, that end up with days and days of 100 degrees or more. That's really where things get raisiny, things get plummy. You end up with super high alcohols. The wines tend to not be enjoyable, and they are a fruit bomb. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that, in California in general. I take a different profile. I take a different style in terms of making the wines. I'm looking for classy wines. I'm looking for, layers. I'm looking for really keeping the elegance in check. For me, all these wines must have elegance. I don't want something that's just going to be so much in your face, either by being over extracted or being over oaked or being over alcoholic, that really it takes the pleasure away from enjoying the food that you're going to eat it with. The key is to make a wine that has the elegance and the integration that is needed to really pair with the food to accentuate what you're eating. And I think this wine does true justice to that.
And this wine sees a considerable amount of French oak as well?
It does. It's aged in 50% new French oak for 11 months. And by the way, it is probably the only wine in that category that you'll find that is handpicked and hand sorted, which is almost impossible to find at that price point.
Yep. The one thing I think there's many ways to sort of judge the quality of the wine, but this is a wine you see on a lot of restaurant wine lists too. One, because it over delivers. Two, it does very well with food, but then it has all of the characteristic of a great food friendly cab that you'd hope to have, right?
Yeah, it is actually the #1 sold Cabernet Sauvignon in the luxury category in the United States.
Yep, absolutely. Alrighty, I think we are jumping. We're going to jump to the reserve cab, I believe, now, and then we'll come back to the blends.
So the reserve cab is just an incredible wine. I mean, this is a wine. So my first reserve, I made in 2009, so 12 years ago. And I just had that wine a couple times, as a matter of fact, for the last few months. And I can tell you that it is still an infant. That wine is capable of aging another 20 to 30 years, probably. So let's look at the quality of a wine. So I'm gonna broach a new subject that is probably foreign to all of you, but it's very dear to my heart because it's helped me really understand my style and how I go about it. So how do you measure the quality of a red wine objectively and not subjectively? Now, don't get me wrong, subjectivity sometimes can be okay. I mean, 3 critics can taste the wine. One can say it's very dark in color. I love the structure. And here's a 95. Another critic could taste it and say, well, it's okay. The middle palate is a little weak. It's nice, but nothing to go crazy about. Here's a 92. Another critic would look at it and say it's an 89, right? It's so subjective, right? So as an engineer and as a winemaker, I like to look at things more objectively. Now, how do you do that? You see, there are 3 things that you do when you take a glass of wine, especially a red wine. The first thing that you do is you look at the color. The second thing that you do is you smell the wine. And the third thing that you do is you taste the wine. These 3 things can be measured today, and they're called phenolics. So if you ever come to the winery and you see a car with a license plate phenolics, that's me. Okay? Phenolics is an objective way at looking at wine quality. You're able to look at a wine and say, this wine can age 30, 40 years because it's got so many tannins. This wine is balanced because of the following 2 parameters on how they relate with each other. This one has 200 parts per million of color because, and as a result of that, color has texture, so the wine's gonna have a lot of texture. So it's a big scientific thing that I won't get into right now. But here's what I will tell you. This wine is in the 0.1 percentile of phenolics all over the world. I put this wine against wine that sells for $500 to $1,400 a bottle, and it comes on top. And please don't take my word for it. Get yourself the best bottle of Cabernet cellar, put it against it, and call your friends blind and ask them to taste the wine. I do that hundreds of times a year, and you'd be surprised. This wine always shows up on top. This wine is just purely made wine, only using our native yeast. So it's about as purely made as possible. It has phenolics that are uberly high, and it's aged in 50% new French oak. But let me just not stop here. There's something else that we do. In France, hundreds of years ago, they figured out that basically, when you make a red wine, when you finish fermenting it in tank, when you open up the valve, the wine that freely runs only through gravity, it's called in French vin de goutte, or in English free run. That is the highest quality wine. But even wines today in France that sell for $1,000 a bottle don't use 100% free run because it's too expensive, because you end up with only half the volume without using what's in the press. This wine and all of our reserve wines, including the Bodyguard, by the way, that we're tasting later, is 100% free run. We only get between 80 to 100 gallons per ton, versus most wineries get 165 gallons per ton. And what does that mean to you? It means that when you taste this wine, upon release, the tannins are going to be integrated. You don't have to lay this wine down for 10 years and 5 years in order for open up. Will it improve with 10 years? Absolutely. And I think you'll probably regret not buying more, because that wine really shows well after about 7 to 10 years. But this wine, because we don't use press, the tannins come from skin. There are 3 kinds of tannins: skin, seed, and oak. The smoothest and best tannins are skin. The seed ones are very hard. The oak ones sometimes can be a little bit hard too, unless you're using very high quality French oak that has extra tight grain, which is what we use. So the tannins that you're tasting in this wine are structured, but they're silky, they're velvety, but the wine will improve with age. So we're proud of this wine. This is a wine for the price point that can compete with any wine out in the market that sells for 10 times the price. And again, we do hundreds of these blind tastings a year, and we rarely ever lose. So we're very proud to bring this wine to the market. And the 18, which I think the one you have right now that's in the market, is a fantastic, fantastic wine. It's pure, it's just elegant, and I can't say enough about it. It's one of my favorite wines that I make. Even though I make a lot of wines, it's one of my favorite that I make.
I can tell your passion when you use words like uber to describe it in wine terms. That's definitely one we'll put up there. I was going to quote it and sort of put it up by your head there. We have a lot of great comments on this wine. So super smooth. Yes. Curtis, I agree. This reserve wine is amazing. I think this is a wine, to your point, it's ungodly priced, right, for what it is. It is an amazing wine. And for those out there that are, sort of looking to start a cellar, or even if you have a cellar already and you're just looking to add those things to it, this is something that is a no-brainer for us, right? Put it in your cellar, drink one now, drink one every year. Start creating that vertical of this wine, because they're only going to get better with age. But to your point, it's right out of the bottle. Right out of the bottle. It's just it's so smooth, so integrated, so wonderful. Steve had a question: how long? What's the ageability? What's the length of time that you would think this would be aged? Because you said you had a 2008, 2009. So how long do you think this would age?
So assuming you're cellaring it properly, obviously, in a 55-degree wine cellar, what I'm seeing about this wine, given now we have 11 years worth of data on this wine, is that even after 11 years, the wine has not stopped improving. So I'm going to predict that it will age for probably 3 decades or more if properly cellared.
Yep.
And maybe more, because of the phenolics. So remember, this wine is in the 0.1 percentile. I hate to quote other names, but I can name you 20 wines that sell for $300 to $600 a bottle that don't have as many phenolics as this wine.
Yep, absolutely. So somebody had a couple questions about the pre-order sheet. All the Google forms where you signed up, those should be live to go on there and order. I don't think this is a limited wine. We can also get more of it. I know the stores all brought in a case of it. Our understanding is we'll be able to continue to get it. And this will definitely be one that we'll continue to share. We'll probably be putting it on our By the Glass here in a couple of the stores as well, because it's so wonderful as well. Not that we don't love them all, but this wine is quite amazing as well. And then somebody had a comment, just ate a piece of sharp white cheddar and then took a sip and it was amazing. Yeah, definitely with food, wine is better. Wine's great by itself, but you add those pairings with it, it becomes quite amazing as well. Are we ready to jump to the next one? I think the next one is going to be the Bodyguard.
Yeah.
Yep,
What a great wine. What a great wine. So everything I just told you, everything I just told you about the reserve Cabernet applies to the Bodyguard. It's 100% free run, aged in 50% new French oak barrels, 15 months in French oak. My brother called me about 3 years ago, and he made a very interesting comment. I was in the middle of harvest. He said, "Danny, can you make a cult wine that anybody can afford?" Now, what is a cult wine? Well, clearly, cult wines are associated with scarcity and rarity, where they're hard to buy. But obviously, they're associated with prices that sell for hundreds of dollars a bottle, right? But the most important thing about cult wines is they tend to be very high in phenolics. If you've ever had a cult wine, they tend to jump at you with a lot of color. They jump at you with just intense aromas, just intensity. Think of intensity when it comes to a red wine. So I picked 2 grapes that are rarely used as a standalone. And I applied my technique into knowing how to extract tannins in order to create a cult wine that anybody could afford. The result was the Bodyguard. Now, most people think of a Bodyguard as, a sturdy man, or Whitney Houston with Kevin Costner. But for us, our Bodyguard is actually our mother, who always shielded us growing up, having been through lots of trials and tribulations, we'll put it simply. So the label depicts a woman shielding her children, and that's why we call it Bodyguard. So the wine is a combination of Petit Verdot, which is a Bordeaux grapes, and some Petit Syrah, which is a grape from the south of France. The intensity of the wine is unreal. If the reserve cab is in the 0.1 percentile of phenolics in the world, this is probably in the 0.01 percentile in the world for phenolics. Beautiful, intense wine, capable of aging for decades, but beautifully integrated. Again, tannins that come from skin, be it free run, and very affordable. And it's received already a few great ratings as well. This was an introduction to the market only a couple of years ago for us, and the market has received it extremely well. Would love to hear some comment, but that is an incredible wine. That is not a cab, but it's an expression of a Bordeaux grape as well as a South of France grape.
Did you mention what the blend was?
Yes, it's Petit Verdot, mostly around 60-some% Petit Verdot, and the rest Petit Syrah.
Absolutely. And how long have you been making this one?
So the first vintage was in 17. Which one is that? The 18? Yes, that's the 18. So 94 points, one enthusiast, Kimberly. Thank you.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm trying to respond to somebody specifically as well. Bodyguard is a home run as well from Curtis. And somebody asked the question: are you saying coat wine or cot wine?
I don't remember saying either. Coat wine.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure either, for sure. Alrighty, I don't see any other questions. As I had a couple, I was looking at one thing, but then I got distracted here.
Colt wine, sorry, Colt wine. Yes.
Colt. Yes, my bad.
Yes.
Yeah, Colt. There's plenty of Colt wines. We don't always name them all, but there's some that think they're Colt wines, and there's others that are truly Colt wines. Screaming Eagle, and to your point, the scarcity and rarity to some extent creates it, and then some of them are self-created phenomenons or hype, and where it becomes more about the winemaker than the wine.
Correct. Well, if you own any of the Colt wines, by all means, put it against this wine. You'll be shocked. Again, this wine has higher phenolics, so more color, more intensity, more aromas than 99.9% of all the wines I've ever measured. And I've measured about 600 wines of it, and it's made naturally. That wine was only made with native yeast only. There's nothing added. There's no sugar addition. There's no acid addition. It's made in the most natural way, capable of aging a long time. So don't be afraid to lay it down for sure.
Yeah. Paul said this Bodyguard is intense. Great word. Cult wine, by far my favorite. Number 6 from Sharon. As well, as much as the Cabernet is Daniel's swing zone, that Bodyguard is epitome of, this is from Kimberly, of being a doctor of fanatics. So absolutely. I mean, it's just an amazing wine. I think the best way to say it. All righty. Last but not least, I believe we're going to hit on the Pessimist. I guess the other question is, and sorry, I literally was trying to type to somebody and I might have zoned out when you mentioned it. Where did you come up with the name Bodyguard from?
So we love the name. I mean, it's very hard to find a name that's available. We were able to get our hands on the name Bodyguard. And the first thing my brother and I thought about it is, well, our mother was our bodyguard. So then we used an artist that made a label that is a rendition of the artist Klimt, Gustav Klimt. So if some of you recognize that art, it's very similar. Obviously, it's not by him, but it's kind of inspired by him. And there you go, Bodyguard was born. It is done extremely well. I mean, this is a wine that is affordable, but that is made in the most pure way, and that will really give you an experience that you won't forget.
Absolutely. What about the ageability of this wine?
Decades, without a question. I mean, it's got the tannins structure to hold up the wine for decades to come. So I wouldn't be afraid of laying it down.
Perfect. All right. Last but not least, I believe we're going to have the Pessimist.
Yes. So Pessimist was an interesting wine. Paso, as you know, we focus mostly on Bordeaux varieties. That's really our signature. Obviously, we do a little bit of Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, but Sauvignon Blanc is Bordeaux. But there are other areas, the ones that you were showing before, Jeff, the ones that tend to run more east, where it's a little bit hotter. Well, they grow great other varieties like Syrah or Petit Syrah or Zinfandel. Zinfandel has been a great staple of Paso Robles. I mean, some of the first grapes planted in Paso Robles were Zinfandel. So so people approached us, and when we made our first cab, it was back in 2013, 3 years later, because our first cab was in 2010, and they said, why don't you make a wine that represents like a red blend that comes from other parts of Paso? So we decided to take it on, and we decided to take on the challenge. So we used those different vineyards and different areas to create a rendition of Zinfandel, Syrah, Petit Syrah, some Tannat, some Grenache, and some vintages, and even some Lagrange. So we really created a red blend that's very unique. And we called it the Pessimist because we thought it was a very cool name. And because a pessimist is never disappointed. And also because at the end of the day, I think I'd rather be a pessimist than a prisoner. So the wine has done extremely well. It's received ratings from 90 to 94 every year now by every critic. It's the #2 most sold red blend in the United States in the luxury category. And again, you're going to find the same way here. It's a different take though than the rest of the wines. And this is something I want to really express very, very clearly is DAOU tends to be dry wines, structure, tradition. I think you've tasted that in all the wines up to now. Pessimist is known to be a funky red blend that's very fruit forward, a hint of residual sugar to really accentuate the wine. So it's a different profile, which is why we didn't want to call it DAOU. We say Pessimist by DAOU because it's a departure of our style. But we really represent the rest of the varieties that grow in Paso. It's a great wine. I love to drink that wine with either dessert or with just cheese. Cheese and crackers or fresh bread and cheese, that one does extremely well. Or just a chocolate cake or some desserts, that one does extremely well as well. So it's got a little bit of residual sugar, but that's the style we're after. So that's why we did it.
Our Montclair owner, who I know his ears probably perked up when you're talking about grilled squid, because he's got a Greek restaurant as well attached to his restaurant, or attached to his wine styles. He was asking about past vintages, basically libraries. Do you ever hold those back? Are those ever available for people to purchase? How do you manage your library releases?
So we keep a library for every vintage. It allows us to taste the wine and see how the wines are evolving. Clearly, when it comes to the highest end wines, we keep a little more in library because these are wines that are really structured and aimed to be aged for decades. So we keep them. Same with the Reserve Cab, same for the Bodyguard. So all the wines that really are made for aging, which in this portfolio we mostly the Reserve Cab and the Bodyguard. We usually keep some wine. So and we're totally open to making some back vintages available. We have some. So it's not a problem. Kimberly can work on making some back vintages now. I highly recommend, if you're going to look at back vintages, as you focus on the reserve cab. And we've got them back to, well, we have them back to 2009, but we really don't on inventory for 9 and 10. We have some 11 and every year since then. They're in a little higher quality, so we could easily put an offering together for you to taste the older vintages. And trust me, they show so well that you will be blown away by how well they've evolved.
Well, it looks like you have, I mean, there's a few other things that I know. I think a few of our stores got the rosé, so maybe talk a little bit about that. I know you make a Pinot Noir, and then there's some estate wines, if you want to touch briefly on those,
Yes,
kind of
yes.
round out the full portfolio.
Yeah, the rosé has been a great success story for us. There are two ways of really making rosés all over the world. The first way is the way we do not use. The first way is to basically use juice from all kinds of different varieties: Merlot, Cab Franc, Cabernet, Syrah, Petit Syrah, Pinot Noir. And you basically, instead of throwing that away or selling it at $1 a gallon, you make a rosé out of it. That is not the right way of making a rosé. When you taste these wines, they don't taste like a traditional rosé, and you're missing the biggest component, which is peaches. I decided to make a rosé. I grew up in the south of France. All our friends own wineries, own vineyards. I mean, there was more rosé on the table than water, I think, on a daily basis. And I love the rosés that are made, what we call in French, méthode provençale, which is the Provence method of making a rosé. It's very different than even parts of France, other parts of France that make a rosé. And the reason why is because when a winemaker is making a red wine, not just in France, but all over the world, they often bleed, we call that in French saignée, they bleed some juice to basically, accentuate more skin, so therefore more phenolics, right? A more intense wine, more color, more tannin structure. Well, the question is, what do you do with all this juice? Well, if you want to sell it, it's about $1 a gallon, so you don't really recoup your investment. So many wineries will make a rosé out of it, so they can recoup some of their investment. The reality of it, though, is those are the rosés you don't want to drink. The way we make our rosé is we use Grenache grapes. Grenache grapes are a lot more expensive than the $1 a gallon juice. And we perform what's called a champagne press. So we extract the juice so quickly that there's very little color. It almost looks like hay or salmon, or almost like a white wine. And then the end result is we blend it with a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. That rosé is off the chart. It's already received 90s from a couple of critics. We released it last year for the first time. And in 3 months, it became the #1 sold domestic rosé in the United States, which is unheard of in 3 months. Trying it is believing it. I love the rosé because the minute you put the rosé in the glass, the peaches just jump out of the glass and mesmerize you. And I love that. I love drinking it with Spanish octopus, grilled Spanish octopus, and maybe some potatoes and some capers and a little bit of olive oil. That's what I eat when I'm in south of France. I'm always ordering the grilled octopus with a bottle of rosé. So on a warm summer day, or even now where it's getting a little warmer, cook up some grilled Spanish octopus and maybe make some potatoes and dwindle some olive oil and some sea salt and some capers, and then open up that very chilled bottle of rosé, and it's heaven. I hope you enjoy it if you try it, but it's a fantastic rosé, and we're just now releasing our second vintage. But like I said earlier on, we were shocked at how well consumer adoption was on this wine. We did it for fun, frankly, but it became the #1 sold domestic rosé in a very few months.
I know some of the one of the Linda she's saying, do we have it? I'm salivating thinking about it. I know some of the stores already have it. I believe like Wisconsin has it, Chicago might have it. The other stores are definitely going to get it. That's the reason it didn't make the cut, because I know this year's vintage, or there was an issue to getting it in on time for the tasting. The other part was there's some Pinot Noir that I know you make, and you make some estate wine. So one question I have is are you back open for business? I know people are looking forward to traveling this summer.
100% open for business. It's very easy to get here, by the way. If you can, you'll probably need to obviously land somewhere first before you get here. So if you can land from wherever you are, to either Denver or Phoenix or Dallas, it's one more hop to San Luis Obispo, and you're 30 minutes from the winery. So it's actually easier to get here than Napa. You don't have to fly in San Francisco, rent a car, and drive an hour and a half or two. You literally can just land in San Luis Obispo, rent a car, and 30 minutes later, you're in beautiful Paso Robles. If you're gonna come, by all means, shoot us a message. We'll get you a reservation. After COVID, everybody's going crazy. Our winery is literally booked up every day because everybody's finally getting out of their home and they want to celebrate life. So follow me on Instagram if you can, Daniel.J.Daou, or you can reach out to Kimberly, but follow me on Instagram because I do a lot of real time. I take you in the vineyard with me, especially when it's closer to harvest. I take you in the winery. I show you how I make the wines, how I extract my tannins. It's a lot of entertainment and fun. And then if you are coming, don't hesitate sending me a message on Instagram, and I will set you up for a great visit. We'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can also reach out to your local store. We always do a great job of trying to connect people when they're traveling, whether wherever they're going. We have our preferred wineries we like to send folks to. So definitely reach out to your local store, and they can help make that connection as well. This was amazing. I mean, I've always loved these wines. I've never had that chance to obviously discuss them with you, but the passion is definitely amazing that you have for it, and it shows in the wines. Quick reminder, these wines are available. I'm hoping that they sell out very quickly, and we just have to continue to order more. I haven't checked my store's order form yet, but I'm pretty sure that I have a few of them on there already. But reach out to your local store. If you don't have the rosé, ask them when it's coming in as well. And if there's other things you want that you see from your portfolio, we can definitely work with Daniel or Kimberly and try to track some things down as well. I think pretty much everything in their portfolio is open for us, aside from maybe some other things. I see some of the stores linking the forms in there as well. Definitely put those orders in and get those in very quickly. But other than that, I don't have anything else, guys. Daniel, thank you for sharing your time, your passion, and more importantly, your wonderful wines with us. Wish you all the best, and hope to make it out there to see you soon myself as well.
Thank you, Jeff. It will be a pleasure to host all of you. And Jeff, if you're coming, by all means, let me know. Love to grab dinner together and show the estate firsthand.
Absolutely, guys. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.